In this lesson, we're going to be talking about how to get started with CSS. In other words, how we can start designing our documents. And in this first chapter, we're going to talk specifically about CSS structures and nomenclature, just so you have a general understanding of the bits and pieces that make up a style sheet. Now, first of all, cascading style sheets contain one or more what are called rule sets. Here's an example of 3 rule sets in a very simple style sheet. The first rule set is highlighted here in orange. Now, a rule set has 2 parts, a selector and a declaration block. The selector is the bit that comes before the opening curly brace, here highlighted in orange, the P. The declaration block is highlighted here in orange and starts with the opening curly brace and finishes with the closing curly brace. Now, a selector can propose more than one match. So in this simple example, the selector is for a P, which, as you'd probably guess, selects a P element or a paragraph. But let's say I wanted to apply a color of red to more than just paragraphs. Well, I could use a compound selector, as you see here. This would select paragraphs, ordered lists, unordered lists, definition lists, and figure elements, and set all of them red. Now, I find this a little bit difficult to read, so I tend to prefer to separate out my compound declarations onto their own lines. But it's really important that you remember the commas between each of the different selectors you are trying to put into that compound selector. Now, a declaration block contains one or more declarations. This rule set example has only a single declaration, color red. This one has 2, color red and font weight bold. Again, it's important to note the punctuation here. Semicolons are used to separate each declaration. Now, each individual declaration within the declaration has 2 parts itself, a property and a value. Here you see the property color, highlighted in orange, and here you see the value being assigned to that property, red. The property and value of a declaration are always separated by a colon. As this simple style sheet has shown you, style rules should best be kept in style sheets, not in line. Now, what does inline mean? Well, here's an example. You could assign a style attribute to any element on the page and assign, let's say, a color red like I do here. This will only apply this style within this element in this specific context, which is not terribly efficient. It's much more efficient for me to take that color red, which I probably want to apply to all links on the page, and simply say a color red as part of a style sheet. Once I've created my style sheet, I can put that in the head of my document. So here, coming back to the HTML skeleton, you'll probably remember from the previous lessons, you see the CSS should go in the head element. Now you can include your CSS either using a link element, which is for a linked style sheet, which is a separate file, or you could use a style element to embed your style sheet into the page. Either of these options is completely valid, but just remember that a style element in the page is only going to affect that page, whereas a linked style sheet can be linked to from multiple web pages, and all of those styles can be shared by all of those pages from one single resource. It's worth noting that one style sheet can import another style sheet. It does this using the @import syntax. Here you see @import another.css file. This is completely legitimate and does work in any browser, but there's a bit of a performance hit in that that separate file then needs to be requested by the browser, which means it's requesting 2 different CSS files or maybe 3 different CSS files depending on how many you have linked versus how many you have importing other files. So that has overhead. It requires the browser to look up that file, make the request for the file, and download the file, all of which reduces the speed with which your page is rendered. So generally, avoid @import. So in this very brief chapter, we've covered how CSS is organized, simple and compound selectors, declaration blocks, declarations, properties, and values, and how to include your style sheets. In the next chapter, we're going to tuck into some really important concepts in CSS, proximity and specificity. I'll catch you in a few.